Hi there. I just thought I'd make this short introduction to provide some context for the paper that I present in this video. The piece investigates the 2014 stage adaptation of An American in Paris. It was originally a third-year essay that I wrote when I was at university, and it was for a module on contemporary musical theatre. I later reworked it into my first proper conference paper, which I presented at the 2019 Sung Stage and Screen Conference, which was held at the University of Leeds. I had written one other conference paper for a smaller university event the previous year, but this was the first paper that I presented at a professional academic conference. That being said, it's not a piece of work that I'm really planning to publish elsewhere or develop further, so I thought it'd be good for it to live here on YouTube. I've kept the PowerPoint presentation mostly the same for this video, so it's far from my best presentation work, but it does its job. I hope this video essay is helpful in some way to someone out there.
During the final decade of the 20th century, the popularity of staged musical adaptations of films appeared to increase. This was mostly due to the Disney Corporation asserting itself as a leading Broadway producer, capitalising on what Rebecca Ann Rugg calls the thrill of seeing live what once was on celluloid. The prevailing success of such productions demonstrates that an indulgence in recycled media is popular amongst audiences and indicates that, quote, a new motive to the dramaturgy of personal nostalgia, end quote, has developed. In a broad sense, the experience of nostalgia could be defined as involving, quote, a comparison between the past and the present that rates the past as superior and finds the present lacking it by comparison, end quote. However, scholarly writings and observations on the phenomenon imply that such feelings can manifest in varying ways and that these can be characterised according to their characteristics. Christopher Wheeldon's 2014 musical An American in Paris is a rich example through which contemporary relationships to past cultures can be observed, as its appeal is generated through icons of historic culture. The musical was adapted from the 1951 Vincent Minnelli film of the same name, which starred Gene Kelly and was structured around music from the Gershwin repertoire. Since its initial opening in Paris, the show has had a successful transfer to Broadway, won 4 Tony Awards, and more interestingly, has proved popular on the West End. Despite the show's relatively short run and narrative that makes no direct comment upon the UK, a filmed performance of the London production was broadcasted by the BBC on Christmas Day 2018, massively increasing the show's British viewership at a time when perceptions of Paris were likely to have been varied. It is due to the apparent exclusion of British culture from the show's narrative that the particular attention will be granted to the London production in the following analysis, wherein the capacity for international nostalgia for an American artefact might be uncovered. Before identifying what specific nostalgias An American in Paris gratifies, it is useful to establish, in a general manner, the elements that facilitate the growth of these feelings of loss and longing. Perhaps unintentionally, devices that condition performances or other types of works place the spectator in a position from where they can easily respond to stimuli with sentimentality. This can lead to an experience of nostalgia. Firstly, simplification carries the ability to imply security and similarity, and when used with the portrayal of a society on stage, an effect which is comforting in relation to cultural nostalgia is created, as the device will involve a prioritised focus on the positive elements of a society, and the removal of any elements that do not harmonise. Dance is one of the most obvious ways in which this device is applied to An American in Paris, as inherent in the medium is the synchronisation of music and embodiment, properties that easily signify uncomplicated interpersonal relationships, especially when used to mark the romance between Jerry and Lisa. Furthermore, when the actors begin to dance, the movement is, quote, made strange rather than automatic, and the spectator is encouraged to take note of the semiotic means, end quote. They immediately foreground the actors and accept the portrayal of harmony. This causes a convenient amnesia for any other elements of the representation that might be detrimental to the harmonic relationships. While this simplification may seem farcical, quote, bodily attentiveness to what feels right often supersedes architectural and historical accuracy, end quote. The spectator, responding to, quote, a nostalgia for time, the lost ideals of innocence and youth, or a nostalgia for relationships, end quote, is willing to succumb to this lack of accuracy, as the portrayals appear to provide an element of life that, for them, is missing. Another device that conditions a work for nostalgic responses is a marker of artificiality or fantasy. The purpose of artificiality in works designed to provoke nostalgia is well illustrated through the idea that when, quote, history is made abstract, the political tensions which must necessarily inform it are purged, end quote. Abstract elements that remind spectators of artificiality grants them permission to partake in the fantasy of an idealised world, like those yearned for through nostalgia, as the removal from realistic portrayals of life welcomes the temporary abandonment of feelings of responsibility. Svetlana Boyum's description of Mamma Mia being, quote, a techno fairy tale, a type of nostalgia in which modern technology is used to revive a past that never was, end quote, indicates the capacity of technology to construct a theatrical environment of escape. Along with fulfilling the artistic purpose of presenting the show as having the vibrancy of a French painting, the electric blue washes and cycloramas that characterise the lighting design of An American in Paris demonstrate how the foregrounding of apparatus, making a theatrical sign out of a means of representation, is compatible with nostalgic fantasy, as, quote, ideas, memories and imaginings emerge as sense is made in the present, end quote. This sense refers to the physiological effect that the lighting has upon the spectator. In the theatre, they would be able to decipher the artificiality of the light, signifying a representation that is purposefully unnatural. While the monochromatic colour palette of the show opposes the multicoloured design of the 1951 film, it fulfills its purpose in creating the same effect as the film within modern-day culture. The stark lighting is the 21st century equivalent to the allure of Technicolor, which in 1951 signified the fanciful MGM film musical through an interpretation of colour where properties of brightness and contrast take primacy. Much of the script and execution of the music does not resemble that of the original film. This may defy the expectations of audience members who attend the production with a nostalgia for the source material. Susan Bennett, however, suggests that this is not detrimental to facilitating nostalgia. Of the reworking of classical texts, she writes, quote, they rely on willing audiences who recognise and are nostalgic for the classical text, but who are attracted to the event for its innovation with and renovation of that text, end quote. Furthermore, the way in which, quote, the impetus that prompts nostalgia must exist in the present, no matter how greatly it may draw upon past memories, end quote, suggests that another device for conditioning nostalgia is the reworking of source materials. By adding new elements to existing work while maintaining its essential properties, that work is given an ageless quality as it is reinvigorated and made applicable to a new context. Otherwise, the work may be reduced to an irrelevant replication that is still enjoyed but not able to influence the emotional and sensory engagement that nostalgia relies on. This device is shown to be effective in An American in Paris through the adaptation of I Got Rhythm, an anthem of relentless optimism that has become a jazz standard. The song begins with Adam playing, quote, at an angsty, sombre pace before accepting it works a whole lot better at a zippier beat, end quote. This free 4-time rendition of the song suggests the well-known number, but does not fulfill its legacy, instead functioning to create suspense for the eventual correction by Henri. When this correction happens, the suspense is rewarded, and celebratory feelings towards the revival of a remembered work are evoked. As the song progresses, its genealogy as an elaborate ensemble number in earlier Gershwin shows such as Girl Crazy and Crazy for You is used to a full capacity, something that was not evident in the Gene Kelly rendition. This has an energising effect for the audience that creates the impression that the piece has gained value through the reliving of it. A staged interruption during the climactic chorus is employed to create further suspense, and upon the gradual return to the final chorus, the celebration returns, this time with a heightened involvement on behalf of the audience, who have just witnessed the process of repression and revival being performed on stage. This song is inherently effective in producing cultural nostalgia, as its lyrics, "I got daisies in green pastures, I got my gal who could ask for anything more," adhere to the American mythology that people look to, quote, "a past in which the human and the natural were in much closer alignment than now," end quote. Additionally, its pentatonic mode enhances the performance of natural frivolity through the honest and earthly tone that it grants the piece. When paired with the celebratory effects previously described, the use of this mythology in the song fulfills the idea that, quote, "from the vantage point of an imperfect present, we may look forward to a return to this alignment," end quote. The themes and theatrical signs within An American in Paris can be received by a spectator who is conditioned by the elements previously discussed to respond to them with priori fallacies. Convinced that the representation of 1940s Paris is superior to their own culture, nostalgia for various properties of the culture as shown on stage is developed. Apart from the musical modifications, the narrative and characters have been altered to incorporate the impact of the Second World War, a theme that was almost completely avoided in the 1951 film. It is easy to understand how this could be seen to diffuse any nostalgic responses. As Sally Williams writes, the show opens not in 1951, but in 1945, when Paris was just emerging from the shadow of Nazi occupation. Wheeldon's own description also seems to contradict the optimism that audiences may expect. He explains how Jerry suffers from traumatic memories, Lisa is Jewish, and Jerry's friend Adam's leg was injured in the war. While the film's, quote, "sense of good cheer was the perfect antidote for audiences still getting over the war," end quote, mythologies of national pride and patriotism has since developed in relation to this theme, and nowadays it could be seen to evoke nostalgia rather than sadness. This is especially true for Britain, where war efforts are generally seen as a proud icon of national identity. It might be concluded that the inclusion of this theme in the stage production could stand as a nostalgic vehicle that has contributed to its success on the West End. According to Ben Furnish, one of the conspicuous dimensions of nostalgia can be described as a nostalgia for place, home, whether ancestral or personal. An American in Paris brings Americana to a Parisian setting, blending US products, notably jazz and Broadway imagery, with European cultural elements such as ballet, cafes, and a historical setting. Raymond Knapp provides an explanation for America's interest in European culture, writing that, quote, "Americans conceived their origins as European, claiming Europe's rich cultural heritage as partly theirs," end quote. This motive of looking to more historically established cultures to help define the culture of a younger nation can explain the reasons for the cultural blending in the 1951 film, but director of the stage adaptation, Christopher Wheeldon's English heritage, means that he may uphold a more European standpoint in this cultural discourse. The show undoubtedly provides an opportunity for Americans to locate a sense of home amongst the cultural prosperity of Europe. However, the more prominent inclusion of ballet compared to the film on which the show is based could represent an effort to balance out the cultural properties of the two countries in light of America being more culturally independent nowadays than it was over 60 years ago. In her book on museum theatre, Susan Bennett observes that in the past, history has been, quote, organised into narratives designed to affirm the superiority of Western cultures and the primitivism of everywhere else, end quote. This constructed history can then be used as, quote, surrogate travel, end quote, by people who have not experienced the reality of the culture. Through this idea, it may be suggested that British and American perceptions of France may have been developed through this surrogate travel. This could result in a feeling that they have always had a connection with Paris, albeit artificial, and may therefore have gained the impression that something of cultural value has been lost from that culture. might have been expected that Wheeldon, in adapting An American in Paris, would have attempted to pay homage to the star vehicle behind the 1951 film. The film was characterised by Gene Kelly and his legacy, as is demonstrated through Alvin Yudkov's research, which recalls Kelly's monumental involvement in both casting and choreographing elements of the production. Despite this, the stage production does not even make use of tap dancing, except for in one number, which was Kelly's signature trait, instead increasing the focus on ballet. This is perhaps unsurprising given Wheeldon's background in ballet. However, this dance style, while not irrelevant as ballet was heavily incorporated during the climax of the film, stands as a signifier of high art. The increased prominence of ballet seems to recharacterise the narrative, as its associations do not complement the legacy of Gene Kelly, whose, quote, Hoofer persona was the Irish-American vaudevillian, the working-class Joe, the hard-working, desperate, hopeful remnant of a time gone by, end quote. It is for this reason that this production may not gratify a personal nostalgia for the star persona of Gene Kelly. This may have been replaced, however, with another nostalgia, one that belongs to Wheeldon. His personal nostalgia may highly involve ballet, and this may have been channeled through his work, overriding the typically American medium of tap. This is a likely suggestion given his success in ballet. Despite the absence of Gene Kelly's legacy of tap dancing, other signs of Americana in relation to the Hollywood legacy are evident throughout the production. These include humorous male friendships, the sidekick model that is notably evident in Singing in the Rain, the music of the Gershwin brothers, and imagery that is associated with early Broadway, i.e. top hats, tailcoats, and feathered costumes in I'll Build a Stairway to Paradise. These icons produce and gratify personal nostalgias that stem from memories regarding the spectator's exposure to American cinema. While the stage adaptation of An American in Paris might appear to contradict its source material through choices of production design and narrative, such changes are necessary in ensuring that the sensory stimuli from which nostalgia is developed are received by modern audiences. They also ensure that any problematic aspects of the represented culture are omitted to create an idealistic society on stage that can frame personal connections in a contemporary context. It could be argued that, while necessary in fulfilling nostalgic desire, this practice of filtering represented cultures for theatrical representation is responsible for harmful societal perceptions through whitewashing, for example. On the other hand, it is evident that this kind of manipulation is an effective tool in maintaining the relevance and impact of historic media. As our sense of, quote, duty to the past is situated through a nostalgia for that authenticity which is not retrievable, end quote, it could be concluded that when the aim of the piece is to gratify nostalgia, authenticity resides in its ability to evoke yearning for spectators, thereby endowing the represented culture with effective impact. This differs from the comprehensive notion of authenticity within works that serve to replicate culture, by suggesting that authenticity is defined by the intention behind the presentation of the piece, rather than the extent to which the original manifestation of the piece is left intact.